Some women just aren't the marrying kind, Joy, and that's okay. Somebody has to be the fun auntie. The whole table laughed. Not a small laugh, either. The big, warm, comfortable laugh of people who have done this so many times. It has become a family tradition, like the potato salad nobody actually likes, but everybody takes. Joy Adeyemi sat at the kids' table. Let me say that again, because it's important. Joy was 30 years old. She owned her own business. She had not been seated at the kids' table by accident, or because the adult table was full. She had been seated there, with a paper cup of lemonade and her 7-year-old nephew flicking peas at her on purpose, because, in the precise words of her Aunt Comfort, delivered 40 minutes earlier with a pat on the cheek, "You don't have a +1 anyway, sweetheart, so it just makes sense." And Joy, who had spent her entire adult life absorbing this exact thing with a smile, looked across that sun-drenched garden at her smirking aunt, at her cousin Beezy flashing a diamond the size of a doorknob, at her ex-boyfriend Daniel, yes, the ex who was somehow now engaged to her cousin, which is a horror we will get to. And she felt something inside her she had felt before, but never all the way to the end. She felt done. So she opened her mouth, and out came the lie that was about to detonate her entire life. "Actually," Joy said, loud enough to carry, "I'm seeing someone." The laughter stopped. "It's pretty serious, actually." She had no idea where the words were coming from. They were just arriving, fully formed, like they'd been waiting behind her teeth for years. He's just running late. Work thing. He's very busy." Aunt Comfort's smile did not fall. It sharpened. It became the smile of a cat that has just watched a mouse volunteer to walk into the open. "Oh, how wonderful," she purred. "And what does this very busy, very serious, very absent man do exactly?" "He's in acquisitions." "True-ish. Real estate, mostly. Getting worse. He travels a lot." And his name? Joy's mind went completely, catastrophically blank. "Byung-seok," she said, grabbing the first thing her panicking brain produced, which was the name on a business card she'd been handed once and shoved in a drawer. "Byung-seok," Aunt Comfort repeated, delighted. She turned to the entire garden, raising her voice to rally the troops. "Everyone, Joy has a boyfriend, a serious one, in acquisitions, named Byung-seok, and he's coming today." She turned back, and her eyes were gleaming with the specific cruelty of a person who has decided to enjoy watching someone drown. "We can't wait to meet him, dear. We'll hold lunch." And that right there, is the moment Joy Adeyemi realized she had 90 minutes to either produce a fake boyfriend named Byung-seok out of thin air or die of humiliation in her cousin's backyard. What she did not know, what nobody in that garden knew, was that there was a real man named Byung-seok, that he was, at that exact moment, parked 400 feet away, that he was one of the most dangerous men on the entire eastern seaboard, and that, in about an hour, he was going to walk into that garden, slide his arm around Joy's waist, kiss her like he'd been doing it for years, and turn the worst day of her life into the best one, for reasons that had nothing to do with luck and everything to do with a secret he'd been keeping about her for 6 months. Before we go one step further, tap subscribe and ring that bell, because this story has more twists than the road up a mountain, and YouTube loves to bury the fun ones. I am not in the mood to let it. Now, let me take you back 90 minutes. To the moment Joy walked into this garden party already wishing she hadn't. 90 minutes earlier, Joy had pulled up to her cousin Bisi's pre-wedding garden party in a 15-year-old Honda with a check engine light she'd learned to think of as a mood ring, and she had sat in the driveway for a full 4 minutes doing the breathing exercise her therapist had taught her. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. You are a grown woman. You own a business. You do not need their approval. In for 4. It worked for exactly as long as it took her to walk through the garden gate. "Joy!" Aunt Comfort descended like weather. She took Joy's face in both hands, examined it like produce, and delivered the opening shot of the day. "You look tired, baby. Are you eating? You know you don't have to keep running that little coffee shop into the ground all by yourself. A woman your age, no help, no man. It's too much. It shows. Right here." She tapped the skin under Joy's eyes, smiled, and swept away. That little coffee shop was Joy's bakery. It was called Adeyemi's. It had her late grandmother's recipes on the menu, and it was, depending on the month, the weather, and whether the espresso machine felt like cooperating, either barely surviving or quietly thriving. Joy had built it from nothing. It was the proudest thing she had ever done. Her family called it her little hobby. The next 90 minutes were a gauntlet, and Joy ran it the way she always did, with a smile sealed onto her face and her real feelings filed somewhere she'd deal with later. Possibly never. Cousin Busy showed her the ring for the 4th time, narrating the carrot weight like a QVC host. And Uncle asked if she was still single in the tone you'd use to ask if someone was still battling an illness. Daniel, her ex, who had dumped Joy 3 years ago, and then, in a twist of fate so cruel it felt personal, started dating and then proposing to her cousin, found her by the drinks table and said, with the oily warmth of a man who thinks he's being kind, "Hey, no hard feelings, right? I mean, look how it all worked out." He gestured at BC, at the ring, at the whole gleaming life. Everybody ends up where they're supposed to be. Joy smiled and said something pleasant and went to find a quiet corner before her face cracked. And it was in that quiet corner, with a paper cup of lemonade, that Aunt Comfort found her, sat her at the kids' table, patted her cheek, and said the thing about the fun auntie. And you know the rest. You know about the lie. You know that her brain, under maximum duress, coughed up the name Byum-seok. What you don't know yet is whose name that actually was. Real quick. If you've ever sat at a family function with a smile painted on while people you're related to took turns making you the punchline, drop one word in the comments. +1. Just that. Let's find each other in there. Now, back to Joy, who has 90 minutes and no boyfriend. Joy made it to the parking lot on legs that didn't entirely feel like hers. The plan, and I use that word generously, was to fake a phone call, step away, call Byum-seok, come back devastated, announce that her poor busy boyfriend had a work emergency and couldn't make it, absorb the disappointed clucking, and survive. It was a bad plan. It just happened to be the only one she had. She pulled out her phone. She was actually rehearsing the fake call out loud. "Oh no, baby, that's okay. I understand. Work comes first." Pacing between 2 rows of cars, when she heard a voice. A low voice. Male. Speaking a language she didn't understand. Korean, she'd realize later, in a tone she absolutely did understand, because some tones are universal. It was the tone of a man telling someone something that was not a request. She looked up. Leaning against a blacked-out car at the edge of the lot, a car so clean and so black it looked like a hole cut out of the afternoon, was a man. He was tall. He was wearing a charcoal suit with no tie that fit him the way water fits a glass. He had straight black hair, sharp features, and the particular stillness of a man who has never in his life had to hurry for anyone. He finished his call, slid the phone into his jacket, and looked at the sky like it had personally disappointed him. And Joy Adiemi, humiliated, desperate, 30 years old and completely out of road, had the single worst and best idea of her entire life. She walked up to a total stranger and said, "Hi, I know this is insane. I need you to be my boyfriend for 1 hour." The man turned his head and looked at her. He did not say, "Excuse me." He did not say, "I'm sorry, what?" He just looked at her, with dark eyes that gave away absolutely nothing, in a silence so complete and so long that Joy started talking again purely to fill it. "Okay, that came out unhinged, I hear it. There's a party. Back there. My family. And they have spent my entire life treating me like a sad little spinster because I'm not married. And today they sat me at the kids' table, and I snapped. And I told them I have a boyfriend, and they demanded to meet him, and I panicked, and I said his name was..." She stopped, squinted at him, lowered her voice. "This is going to sound crazy. I said his name was Byum-seok." Something happened in the man's face. It wasn't much. A stranger wouldn't have caught it. But Joy, who read faces for a living across a bakery counter, caught it. A flicker, fast as a card trick, there and gone. "Why that name?" the man said. His English was precise, lightly accented, unhurried. "Off a business card, in my junk drawer. I have no idea who he even..." She shook her head hard, like an etche sketch. "It doesn't matter. Look, I will pay you. I have..." She dug in her bag. $40. And a punch card. One more punch and you get a free large coffee. It's almost full. I'll just give you the whole card. 1 hour. You walk in, you're rich and busy and obsessed with me. You let them be jealous for 60 minutes and you leave. Please. I am begging a man in a parking lot. This is my life now." The man looked at the $40. He looked at the punch card. He looked at Joy. Really looked in a way that made her feel, briefly, like she was the only thing in the parking lot worth looking at, which was disorienting because she was fairly sure she looked like a woman having a nervous breakdown next to a Honda. And then Byum-seok, Because of course it was him. Of course the name in her junk drawer belonged to the man in the parking lot. But we'll get to how. Did something that surprised even him? He said, "Keep your money." Is that a no? That is a yes. He pushed off the car and buttoned his jacket in one smooth motion. 1 hour, but I have conditions. Joy blinked. You have conditions? For fake dating me at a barbecue? 1. You will not tell me to do anything once we are inside. You will let me work. He started walking toward the garden gate, and she scrambled to keep up. 2. When this is over, you will answer one question for me, honestly. That is my fee. What question? Later. He stopped at the gate, looked down at her. 3. If I am going to be obsessed with you, I need to know your name. Joy, she said. Joy Adeyemi. Joy Adeyemi, he repeated, and the way he said it made it sound like a fact he was filing away permanently. He held out his arm. Then let us go make your family deeply uncomfortable. She took his arm. She had no idea she'd just grabbed onto the most dangerous man on the coast. She just knew his arm was very solid, and he smelled expensive, and for the first time all day, she wasn't walking into that garden alone. Here is something nobody tells you about confidence. It is contagious, and it is also terrifying when you don't know where it's coming from. Joy walked back into that garden on the arm of a stranger, fully expecting to have to do all the work, to narrate him, to prop him up, to whisper coach a nervous accountant through pretending to like her. Instead, the moment they crossed the threshold, Seok went somewhere. He didn't get louder, he got quieter, which was somehow worse for everyone in that garden. He scanned the party once, a single slow pass, the way a lighthouse beam crosses water, and Joy felt the exact moment every head began to turn, because a man who looked like that, moved like that, and was attached to Joy, of all people, did not compute. There she is, Aunt Comfort's voice carried across the lawn, already armed, already certain this was going to be a bloodbath in her favor. And, oh, is this... Seok did not wait to be introduced. He crossed the remaining distance, slid his arm around Joy's waist like he'd done it 10,000 times, leaned down and kissed her temple. Slow, unhurried, the kiss of a man with nowhere else in the world he needed to be. "Sorry I'm late, love," he said. Warm, easy. A completely different voice than the one he'd used in the parking lot. Traffic. The garden went silent. Joy's heart was going like a hummingbird, and not entirely from the stress. Up close, the performance was flawless. If she hadn't met him 11 minutes ago next to a Honda, she'd have believed it herself. "You must be the family," Seok said, straightening, his hand resting easy on the small of Joy's back. He smiled. It was a good smile. It did not reach his eyes, but only Joy was close enough to know that. "Joy has told me so much, though," and here he looked mildly at the kids' table, at the paper cup of lemonade, at the 7-year-old still holding a pea. "She didn't mention you'd be seating her with the children. I must have misunderstood. I assumed a family would put their most successful member somewhere with a real chair." Silence. Aunt Comfort's mouth opened, closed. "I'm sorry. Successful?" Daniel, the ex, recovered first, with a smug little laugh. "Joy runs a coffee shop." Seok turned to look at Daniel, just turned his head, and looked. "She runs a business," he said pleasantly, "that she built from nothing, with no investors, no inheritance, and no help, in an industry with a 90% failure rate, in a city that taxes small businesses like they're personally offensive. I've reviewed harder balance sheets run by men with MBAs and trust funds." A beat. "What is it you do again?" Daniel, who worked in consulting in the way that men who don't really do anything work in consulting, opened his mouth and discovered there was nothing in it. "That's what I thought," said Seok gently, and turned away. And the dismissal was so clean, so total, so surgical, that it took the entire table a full 3 seconds to understand that a man had just walked into their party and removed Daniel's spine without raising his voice. Joy stared up at her fake boyfriend. He glanced down at her, and, just for her, just for a second, the corner of his mouth moved. "Breathe, Joy Adeyemi," he murmured. "You're doing the gaping thing." She closed her mouth. This, she thought, was going to be a very interesting hour. If you are enjoying watching this man dismantle these people one by one, and I know you are because so am I, do me a favor and smash that like button. It tells YouTube to push this story to every single person who has ever wanted exactly this to happen at their own family function. Go on, he's just getting started. The thing about a great performance is that sometimes halfway through, the actors forget they're acting. The hour was supposed to be simple. Seok would be impressive, the family would be jealous, and at the 60-minute mark he'd get a work call and leave, and Joy would ride the afterglow of having been seen for one afternoon as a woman someone wanted. That's not what happened. What happened was that the hour got good. It started at the lunch table. The adult table now, because Seok had pulled out a chair for Joy at the head of it with such quiet authority that no one dared object. He sat beside her. And he was, it turned out, once he stopped being terrifying, extremely funny. In a dry, almost invisible way, where he'd say something so flatly devastating that you'd be laughing for 10 seconds before you realized how brutal it was. When Aunt Comfort tried to corner Joy about her biological clock, Seok said, without looking up from his plate, "Joy is 30. The clock is fine. I'd be more concerned about the clock on your potato salad, which has been in the sun for 2 hours. Food safety is also a kind of family planning." When Cousin Bissy flashed the ring for the 5th time, he examined it with the bored eye of a man who had clearly seen a lot of jewelry and said, Lovely. A little cloudy near the table. The cut hides it well, though. Whoever sold it to you did you a kindness." Bissy spent the rest of the afternoon holding her hand at a different angle. And in between the demolitions, something quieter was happening. He noticed Joy hadn't eaten. The whole party, she'd been too anxious to put anything in her stomach, and he clocked it without a word, just built her a plate, set it in front of her, and said, "Lo, eat. You can't win a war on an empty stomach, and this is a war." She ate. It was the first thing anyone had done for her all day instead of to her. And Joy noticed things too. She noticed that when the family patriarch, her great-uncle, a loud, table-thumping man, slammed his hand down to make a point during an argument about football, Seok went still. Just for a moment, a stillness with a held breath inside it, and then it passed, and he was easy again, but Joy filed it away because she knew that particular stillness. It was the stillness of someone whose body remembered something the rest of him had decided not to talk about. She didn't ask. You don't ask a stranger. But she noticed. And here is the moment the whole thing tipped. The moment that, later, both of them would point to as the place where the performance quietly died and something real moved into its house. Aunt Comfort, sensing she was losing, played her trump card. She announced sweetly that there would be dancing, and she requested, loudly, pointedly, with a smile like a knife, that the lovely couple share the first dance. She was certain, you understand, that this would break the illusion. No real fake boyfriend would dance. Surely this beautiful stranger would demur, make an excuse, expose the lie. Seok stood up. He held out his hand to Joy. "I should warn you," he said quietly, just to her as the music started. "I have not done this in a very long time." Danced? Held onto something on purpose. And then he pulled her in, one hand at her back, and they danced on the lawn in front of a family that had come to laugh at her. And somewhere in the middle of that dance, Joy looked up at this impossible man and realized that neither one of them was acting anymore, and that he knew it too, and that neither of them was going to be the one to say so. The hour came and went. Neither of them mentioned it. It was around the 4-hour mark. Yes, 4. The 1-hour deal had quietly become the whole afternoon, and nobody acknowledged it, that the second car arrived. Joy noticed it because Seok noticed it first. They were sitting together a little apart from the others, talking about her grandmother's recipes and the bakery and the espresso machine she'd named Gladys, when his attention shifted just slightly to the front gate. A second blacked-out car had pulled up outside. A man got out. Older, neat, in a dark suit, with the bearing of someone who took orders from exactly one person on Earth. He came through the gate, crossed directly to Seok, leaned down, and murmured something in Korean. Low, fast, urgent. And across the garden, Joy watched two things happen at once. She watched Seok's face do almost nothing, which she was beginning to understand was how he reacted to important things. And she watched her uncle, the connected one, the one with the import business, and the lawyer on retainer, and the friends he never quite explained, go absolutely white. He had been laughing a second before. Now he was staring at Seok like a man who had just recognized a face he'd only ever seen in a context he didn't talk about. He leaned to his wife, whispered. His wife's hand went to her chest. The whisper spread. Joy could see it moving through the better-connected pockets of the party like a crack moving across ice. And one by one, the people in this garden who actually knew things stopped seeing a handsome businessman named Beom Seok and started seeing who he actually was. Joy didn't understand it yet, but she understood that the temperature of the entire party had changed, and that it had changed because of the man whose arm she'd grabbed in a parking lot. Beom Seok turned to her. The easy warmth he'd worn all afternoon was still there. But underneath it now, she could see the other thing. The parking lot thing. The thing that made grown men go pale. "Joy," he said quietly. "I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you before someone else does it badly." He paused. "The name in your junk drawer. The business card. Do you remember who gave it to you?" "No, She frowned. "A man came into the bakery a few months ago, asking about the building, the lease. I told him it wasn't for sale, and I was busy, and he left a card, and I never called because something about it felt—" She stopped. Her stomach dropped. "That was you. The card was yours. It was mine. Why was you asking about my building?" And Beom Seok, most feared man on the eastern seaboard, fake boyfriend of 4 hours, the man who'd built her a plate and danced with her on a lawn, took a breath and told her the truth, which is where this story stops being a comedy for a few minutes. "I own most of the block your bakery sits on," Beom Seok said. "I have been quietly buying it for 2 years, not to develop it, to protect it. There is a developer, an ugly one, who has been trying to seize that whole street through a company you would not recognize, using methods that are not legal and not gentle. I have been buying the block out from under him, one building at a time, to stop it." Joy's mouth was dry. "And my building?" "Your building is the last one he wants and the last one I do not own, because you refuse to sell. To him, to me, to anyone." Something moved in his face. That flicker again, but warmer this time. "Do you know how many people refuse me, Joy? In a given year? A lot? None. You are the only one. For 6 months, my people have brought me reports on a small bakery run by a woman who would not sell, would not be intimidated, would not be bought, and who, when the developer's men came to frighten her, gave them free coffee and a lecture about supporting local business until they left confused." The corner of his mouth moved. "I came here today to meet her. The holdout. I was parked outside trying to decide how to approach a woman famous in a very small circle for being completely unafraid of dangerous men." He looked at her, and then she walked up to me in a parking lot and asked me to be her boyfriend for $40 and a coffee punch card. Joy stared at him. "You're telling me you came to my cousin's barbecue because of my bakery?" "I came to the parking lot because of your bakery. I stayed at the barbecue," he said, "because of you." And there it was. Out loud. The thing they'd both been not saying for 4 hours, set down between them on a garden bench while her family quietly lost its mind 40 feet away. But Beom Seok wasn't finished, because there was one more thing, and it was the thing that turned the whole afternoon over. "The developer," he said. "The man who has been trying to take your block, using a shell company, pressuring you, frightening you, trying to force you out so he can collapse the whole street." He nodded very slightly across the garden. "Would you like to know whose name is on the shell company, Joy?" She followed his gaze. It landed on Daniel, her ex, Cousin BC's fiancé, the man who told her, by the drinks table, that everyone ends up where they're supposed to be. "Daniel," Joy breathed. "Daniel has expensive taste and no money," Beom Seok said. "He is marrying into your family because your family has more money than he does, though less than they pretend. And to fund the lifestyle he's promised them, he went into business with the developer. His piece of the deal was delivering the one building no one could get." A pause. "Your building, the man who is about to become your cousin's husband, has spent 6 months trying to take your grandmother's bakery to pay for his own wedding." Joy sat very still on the bench. All the mockery, all the fun auntie and the kids' table, and the some women just aren't the marrying kind. And the whole time, the smuggest man in the garden had been quietly trying to take the one thing she'd built that was hers. "I'm going to need a minute," Joy said faintly. "Take the minute," said Beom Seok. "And then, if you like." And now the dangerous voice was fully back, but it was on her side, which was a feeling she had never had in her life. "I will show you what happens to men who try to take things from people I have decided to protect. We are heading into the karma, and it is delicious. So if you're with me, comment one word. Punch card, just that. It's our little inside thing now. Let the algorithm know you're here. Now. Here's the twist inside the twist. There was one more thing Beom Seok hadn't mentioned. He told her on the bench because he had apparently decided that today was the day he stopped leaving things out. The hostile takeover of your block, he said. The developer's deal. Daniel's piece of it. He paused. I ended it this morning, before I came here, before you ever walked up to me in the parking lot. Joy turned to him. The developer's financing came through a fund, Beom Seok said. I own the fund. I pulled it at 9 o'clock this morning. The deal is dead. Your building was safe before you and I ever met. Daniel just doesn't know it yet. He's going to find out. He checked his watch, mild as milk. Very soon. Wait. Joy's head was spinning. You saved my bakery this morning? And then you let me beg you to be my fake boyfriend in a parking lot and you didn't mention it? You did not ask if I had saved your bakery, Beom Seok pointed out reasonably. You asked if I would be your boyfriend for 1 hour. I try to answer the question people actually ask. That is insane. You can't just... Joy was sputtering, and the strange thing, the thing she'd examine later, was that she wasn't angry. She was something else, something that felt dangerously, ridiculously like the beginning of being crazy about someone. Why wouldn't you tell me? And here Beom Seok, eloquent, lethal, 4 hours of flawless charm, completely fell apart. Because, he said, and stopped. He, who was never at a loss for words, was suddenly very interested in his own hands. Because if I told you the bakery was safe, you would have had no reason to keep talking to me, and I had not yet figured out how to give you a different reason. So I said nothing. And then you grabbed my arm, and I thought, this is the reason. This is how I get to keep talking to her. I will be her terrible fake boyfriend for 1 hour. He exhaled. It has been 4. I have not wanted an hour to end this badly in 9 years. Joy looked at the most dangerous man on the eastern seaboard, who had just confessed, with the emotional fluency of a nervous teenager, that he'd ridden along with her insane lie because it was the only way he could think of to spend more time with her. You're bad at this, she said wonderingly. At what? Liking someone. You're terrible at it. You dismantled my entire family without breaking a sweat, and you can't tell me you like me without staring at your hands. Yes, Beom Seok admitted. That is accurate. And Joy Adeyemi started to laugh. Really laugh. For the first time all day. Maybe the first time in months. And after a moment, quietly, so did he. Daniel found out about the deal at 4:47 p.m. Joy knew the exact time because she was watching when his phone buzzed, and she got to see the whole thing happen on his face in real time, which she would later describe as one of the great pleasures of her adult life. First, the frown, then the second buzz, and the third, then Daniel stepping away from Cousin Beezy, phone to his ear, the color draining out of him the way it drains out of a man who has just learned that the financing for his entire future evaporated at 9 o'clock that morning, and he's been smiling at a barbecue ever since, unaware he was already ruined. Because here is what collapses when a man like Daniel loses his deal. Everything. The money he'd promised Busy's family, gone. The lifestyle he'd been borrowing against, gone. The wedding, which he'd been funding on the assumption of a payout that no longer existed, suddenly a stack of invoices with no money behind them. And Cousin Bissy's family, who Joy now understood had been planning this marriage as a merger, started doing math at the exact moment Daniel started sweating. It rippled out across the garden the way Joy's lie had rippled, 90 minutes earlier, except in reverse, and aimed at the right person for once. And Aunt Comfort? Oh, Aunt Comfort. Aunt Comfort had spent the entire afternoon watching her favorite punching bag turn out to be dating the most powerful man anyone in that garden had ever been frightened of. And somewhere around the time the connected uncle explained, in a terrified whisper, exactly who Beom Seok was, Aunt Comfort executed the single most spectacular personality reversal Joy had ever witnessed. She appeared at Joy's elbow with a plate of food and a smile like a hostage video. Joy, sweetheart. Her voice had gone up an octave into pure honey. I was just telling everyone, I always knew you were special. Didn't I always say? My Joy, she's a late bloomer, but she blooms beautifully. And this lovely man, Beom Seok, you must come to dinner, to Thanksgiving, to everything. You're family now. Beom Seok looked at Aunt Comfort. He let the silence stretch just long enough to be cruel. You sat her at the children's table, he said, 90 minutes ago, because she didn't have a +1. Aunt Comfort's smile froze. I have an excellent memory, Beom-seok continued pleasantly. It is a professional requirement. So I will remember this afternoon very clearly. All of it. The lemonade, the potato salad, the part where a room full of adults decided the most accomplished person here was the one worth laughing at. He set down the plate she'd handed him, untouched. Joy will decide who she sees at Thanksgiving. She has had quite enough people deciding things about her life for her. Haven't you, love? Quite enough, Joy agreed. And she said it sitting at the head of the adult table, with a plate someone had made for her, beside a man who had spent the afternoon making sure that, for the first time in her life, the joke in that garden was never going to be her again. The party ended the way parties end when the host has just discovered the groom is broke and the family pariah is dating a kingmaker, quickly and with a lot of people pretending to take phone calls. Joy and Beom-seok left together. Of course they did, and they ended up exactly where they'd started. In the parking lot, by her 15-year-old Honda with its mood ring check engine light, next to his car that looked like a hole cut out of the night. For a moment, neither of them said anything. So, Joy said finally, the hour's over. The 4 hours. The deal's done. You held up your end. My family will be terrified of me for the rest of my natural life, which honestly is the nicest gift anyone's ever given me. She tucked her hair behind her ear. You said your fee was a question. One honest answer. So, ask. Beom-seok was quiet for a moment, leaning against his car, looking at her in the parking lot light. That was the question, he said. What was? I was going to ask why a woman like you was single. That was my fee. The question I'd been wondering since the reports first crossed my desk. He shook his head slowly. But I spent an afternoon with you, and now it's a stupid question, because the answer is obvious. You are single because everyone in your life spent 30 years convincing you that being chosen was a thing you had to earn by being smaller. And you refused to get smaller, so they called it a flaw. He looked at her. It is the least flawed thing about you. I withdraw the question. Joy stood in the parking lot and found, to her enormous irritation, that her eyes were stinging. That's... Okay, you can't just say things like that. You emotionally constipated mob boss. You stare at your hands when you try to say you like me, but you'll just casually... Joy. What? Would you have dinner with me? Once? Not a performance? No family? You be a person, I will attempt to be a person, and we will find out if the thing that happened on that lawn happens again when no one is watching. He paused. I should warn you, I am very bad at being a person. You have seen the evidence. I will stare at my hands a great deal. Joy looked at him for a long moment. One dinner, she said. But I'm choosing the place. And you're going to taste test the new croissant recipe, and you're going to give me a real opinion. Not a scary rich man opinion, and if you tell me it reviews well against comparable pastries, I'm leaving. Understood. And the $40 and the punch card are still yours. You earned them. A deal's a deal. The corner of his mouth moved. The almost smile, the one she was already dangerously starting to collect. Keep the money, he said. I'll take the punch card. He slipped it into his jacket, next to the phone that ran an empire. I have decided I would like the free coffee, and the excuse to come back for it. Here's the thing I haven't told you. The thing Joy didn't find out until their third dinner, when she'd stopped being able to pretend this was casual. She asked him, over the croissants, which he'd declared, after long and visible internal struggle, better than anything I have eaten in a building I own, which she'd decided to accept as the highest compliment he was structurally capable of giving. She asked him why he'd really come to her bakery's block in the first place. 2 years of quietly buying up an entire street to protect it from a developer. It was a lot of money and a lot of trouble for a block he had no personal connection to. Beom-seok was quiet for a moment. I have a connection to it, he said. What connection? Your grandmother. Joy put down her coffee. 22 years ago, Beom-seok said, I came to this country with nothing. No money, no English, no people. I was 19 and I was angry, and I was very close to becoming the kind of man who does not come back from the things he does at 19. He turned his cup slowly on the table. There was a bakery on that block, a small one, run by a Ghanaian woman who did not know me and had no reason to be kind to me. I used to stand outside it because it was warm, and it smelled like somewhere I wasn't. And one morning she came out, and instead of telling me to leave, she handed me a bag of day-old bread and said, his voice did something. Just slightly. She said, you look like someone nobody's feeding. Sit, eat. The world is not done with you yet. It has only been rude so far." Joy's hands had gone to her mouth. "She fed me every morning for a year," Beom-seok said. "She never asked who I was or what I did. When I had money, much later, I went back to thank her and the bakery was closed and I was told she had passed. I did not know she had a granddaughter. I did not know the recipes had survived." He looked up at Joy. "When the reports crossed my desk 6 months ago, a small bakery on that block, a stubborn woman who would not sell, who gave free coffee to men sent to frighten her. I read the menu they attached. And I recognized the bread, Joy. I recognized your grandmother's bread on a menu 22 years later." A pause. "I did not start buying that block to protect a stranger. I started buying it the week I realized whose recipes were on that menu. I have been protecting your grandmother's bakery since before I ever knew your name. I just didn't know how to walk in and tell you that the woman who saved my life made the cinnamon bread you sell on Tuesdays." Joy was crying, openly now, in the middle of her own bakery, after hours, across a table from the most dangerous man on the coast, who had just told her that the kindness her grandmother threw into the world 2 decades ago had circled all the way back around and saved Joy's livelihood, without Joy ever knowing it was happening. "She used to say that," Joy whispered. "The world's not done with you. It's only been rude so far. She said it to me. The day I opened this place, I had no idea she said it to anybody else." "She said it to me first," Beom-seok said gently. "I have been waiting 22 years to find out where to put the thank you. It turns out the answer was across a table from her granddaughter, eating her bread, badly in love, and very bad at saying so." Daniel did not marry Cousin Bisi. The merger, it turned out, only made sense in one direction. And once the money was gone, so was Bisi's family's enthusiasm, and Daniel slunk off to a smaller city to consult about things to people who didn't know him yet. The developer who tried to take Joy's block got a visit, the details of which are not part of this story, and has since retired from the practice of frightening small business owners permanently. Aunt Comfort tells everyone now that she always knew Joy and Beom-seok were meant to be. She has told the story so many times that she has edited herself out of the kids' table part entirely. Nobody corrects her. It's funnier to let her believe she's gotten away with it. And Joy has discovered that living well really is the whole entire revenge. You don't even have to add anything to it. The bakery is thriving. It turns out a block that is quietly, completely safe from predatory developers is a very good place to run a small business. And it turns out that having the most feared man on the coast show up every evening at closing to taste test croissants and glower at anyone who's rude to the staff is extremely good for foot traffic. The baristas were terrified of him for about a week. Now they make him taste the new drinks and tell him when he's being dramatic, and he allows it, which is the most shocking thing anyone who knows him has ever witnessed. And Joy Adeyemi, 30 years old, seated at the kids' table for the last time in her life, did eventually go to another family function. A year later, Aunt Comfort's Thanksgiving, she walked in alone, on purpose, because she'd grown all the way into the woman who didn't need an arm to hold to walk into a room. And then, 20 minutes later, the blacked-out car pulled up outside, and Beom-seok crossed Aunt Comfort's living room, past the relatives who now sat up straighter when he entered, past the empty chair no one would ever again dare to seat Joy away from. And he kissed her, in front of all of them, slow and unhurried, a man with nowhere else in the world he needed to be. Except this time, nobody was laughing, and neither of them was acting. If you made it all the way to the end, you're exactly my kind of person, and I mean that. Now Joy and Beom-seok's story isn't over, because his world has rules, and falling for a baker who isn't afraid of him breaks several of them. And there are people in his life who are going to have opinions about the woman who collects his almost smiles. And because Daniel kept a folder, and folders have a way of coming back, and because somewhere out there, a developer who retired permanently has a brother who hasn't. Part 2 is coming. Subscribe so it finds you, ring the bell so YouTube can't bury it, and tell me one thing in the comments. When Beom-seok said yes in that parking lot, did you already know he wasn't a stranger? Or did the bread get you the same way it got me? Be honest. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.